Hello, everyone. I am Jennifer Braverman. Welcome to Stories from the Earth, where we explore mankind's relationship and connection to the natural world. We would like to take a quick moment to invite our listeners to consider supporting us through a humble little donation. If you go to our Anchor page and click the support button, there'll be options to donate for $1, $5, or $10. And the donations go towards helping us with future projects, such as launching an herbal educational curriculum we've dubbed the People's Herb School, as well as funding to help take this show on the road and do some on-site reviews and interviews at herb farms and schools and other interesting places relevant to our podcast. Today we have a special episode. We are doing something a bit different since my co-host Ellen is having time with her family and her new baby. Today we're having a panel chat about fall/autumn, winter, and the concept of change and change of seasons. This is a quote from Wikipedia as the definition of autumn, which I forgot because we use fall here in the United States so often, but a lot of the world uses autumn. Autumn, also known as fall in North American English, is one of the 4 temperate seasons outside of the tropics. Autumn marks the transition from summer to winter. In September, Northern Hemisphere, or March, Southern Hemisphere, autumn is the season where the duration of daylight becomes noticeably shorter and the temperatures cool considerably. Day length decreases and night length increases as the season progresses until winter solstice in December, Northern Hemisphere, and June, Southern Hemisphere. One of its main features in temperate climates is the striking change in color for the leaves of deciduous trees as they prepare to shed. And that's by Wikipedia. Winter is the coldest season of the year in polar and temperate climates. It occurs every autumn. It occurs after autumn and before spring. The tilt of the Earth's axis causes seasons. Winter occurs when a hemisphere is oriented away from the sun. Different cultures define different dates as the start of winter, and some use a definition based on weather. I am joined by 4 other lovely ladies. I would like everyone to take this opportunity to just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do, and anything else you'd like to say. And you want to start, Byron?
I always have to start because I have that B name, but I'm happy to do that. Hey, everybody. I'm Byron Ballard. I'm a Western North Carolina native. I'm a witch and an animist and a writer and a priestess and a farmer and a gardener and a hiker in the woods and a hugger of trees. I think I'll start there.
Sounds good. Okay, Sara?
Thank you. Yeah. First of all, it's great to be with you. Thank you all for gathering to do this, digital and otherwise, in spirit. Hopefully soon in person. So I'm Sara, and I live in Bat Cave. It's well up on the mountain, very rugged terrain. And I am a naturalist. I work with agroforestry and outreach. I love being in the woods, farming the forest, especially foraging mushrooms. I love to work with ginseng and other at-risk native botanical species that are usually medicinal, and some are edible too.
Hi, I'm Lori Jenkins. I am the owner of Sister of Mother Earth. I make lots of yummy herbal foods, fire ciders, infused honeys, syrups, all types of foods that we can use in the kitchen. I'm also a kitchen witch, a land witch, a forager. I love the mountains. Although I'm not from here, my family's from here, and this is home for me. And I'm just grateful to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deanna Rose. I'm an herbalist and singer and song catcher and a gardener as well. And so I'm just here I'm excited to connect in this kind of roundtable way and hear what everyone has to say. Glad to be here.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to put everyone's links in the description so you'll be able to learn more about what everyone is up to, and they have all undersold themselves. They are fantastic. They're doing awesome things. Go check everyone out. We will just jump right into the questions and see where that takes us. So the first question, and I'm just sort of starting with fall and then going into winter, and we'll just sort of, what does fall/autumn mean to you, and what does this time represent to you?
Yeah, what you were saying about your Wikipedia reading of the natural balance of light and dark around the equinox and leading into winter around the summer solstice, or around the winter solstice, excuse me. I live in a place of pretty profound nature. And so the thing that stands out the most to me around the time of the autumn equinox is just the balance of light and dark, which occurs between two different points in time. You have the equinox, and then you have the equilux. And that kind of changes depending on your location in the world, on the planet. And it changes depending on which equinox is occurring. So it happens, a couple days, I do believe, before the spring equinox and a couple days after. It's called equilux. And so it's a really interesting period of time, and it's quite liminal in the way that astronomically, because of a few interesting variables with the Earth and the sun, it adds about 10 minutes, or it can remove 10 minutes. So, around the autumn equinox, it actually adds around 10 minutes in this location to the daytime, which is pretty interesting, as opposed to having, the longest day and the longest night of the year. You have the equality, but also this liminal time of balance. And it's pretty interesting in the natural world too.
I was just wondering if your cell phone adds that 10 minutes or something automatically, or does it just...
I don't believe there's any kind of daylight savings adjustment or anything. I think it just adds about 10 minutes of light to sunrise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it gets lighter around 10 minutes earlier than it would, outside of that time. And it's pretty interesting because it's regarding the sun's proximity to the equator, which means that, due to atmospheric refraction and the fact that the center of the sun is still below the equator, it comes up and it doesn't come up in a different way. But, the atmosphere refracts the sunlight. It's pretty interesting. It's definitely a liminal time that we can feel viscerally here in the forest too, obviously, because it's approaching autumn. All of the massive changes that occur all around us during that time.
Yeah, and especially since you're so much more I think we're all pretty much in the woods. Are you a higher elevation than Asheville?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I bet you get even more change.
We have microclimates, which are really interesting. And so 10 minutes up the road, it could be totally different. Elevation, totally different. The holler is totally different.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, it really makes for an interesting, transitioning of seasons over here. Sometimes we're earlier, sometimes we're behind everybody else. It's hard to tell around the mountains.
I know there's this one tree by where I live. It decided that it is decidedly fall. It's this little tiny tree, and it's changing colors, and it's pretty much lost half its leaves already. It's like, I'm here already, and the rest of the trees are all like green. They're like, okay, no, not yet. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, there's so many different ways that autumn can be reflected. Right now we're kind of having a drought, and so some decide to call it quits early, and they're already kind of changing their leaves. Yeah, there's definitely a whiff of autumn in the air already.
I want to be a little bit folkloric about fall, if I can.
Yeah.
So here's what fall feels like to me. That it's the time, and some of you have children, I know, it's the time when nature gets ready for bed. And that's a long process. And if you have children, it can be a really, really long process. Brushing the teeth and washing the face and getting the jammies on and reading history and getting the water and all of that. But my baby is now 31 and she doesn't live with me. But even my own process for going to bed is flossing and brushing and washing my face and shutting down the computer and all those things. And I think that's what nature does in the fall. So I felt a little cheated by the Wikipedia definition that it's just, the thing between summer and winter. Well, it isn't. It's a process. It's this beautiful texture, deep process of things beginning to shut down so that they can go to sleep for the winter, especially in the zone that we're in here, so that you do see autumn start in August. And there are some trees that go to bed early. They're like that cranky old 80-year-old woman who, I got to go to bed by 9 o'clock. And then there are trees that are going to hold out to the last possible minute. And the plants are the same way. So there are plants that they've already put themselves to bed and you're not going to see much of them until the spring. And then there are the plants that we only see glorious in the fall, like the species clematis, that right now is so gorgeous and the smell is so profoundly beautiful. So I like to use that time in the fall to get myself ready for winter and to tell myself all those things that I need to catch up on and catch up with, because once winter is here, I want to engage in some deep meditative time and to get some real profound rest. So fall feels alternately like a very busy time, but also is a time of settling down and settling in.
Yeah, it's definitely like a cleaning out time for me. I know a lot of people do spring cleaning, but I typically find myself cleaning out at this moment to get ready for wintertime, like Byron was talking about, because, I want that time to rest, to do things that are rejuvenating for myself, but I can't do that if I feel like I'm having to clean out and make room and those kind of things. So this is that time where I start always doing that because it just feels natural to me. That's like the natural rhythm of things for me.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, it feels very active, but it feels different from summer. There's this getting ready feeling, but it's very, I don't know, it's very refreshing.
It's like today, I don't know if anybody was outside today, but the wind changed a little today. And it felt very different today. And it was that moving energy. And all I wanted to do was be outside today. So it's definitely making its way in. But I do want to add, Byron was talking about children and putting to bed. I have young adults. And they always tend to start getting ready for bed. And then they have this moment of like, wild chaos about 10, 11 o'clock. And I feel like that's what happens here in the South, especially, even in the mountains. We have, fall creeping in. Well, we'll get like this really warm spell, September, and it's like, where did that come from? And that's my wild children, up at midnight in bed for 3 hours. Yes, that's a good analogy. I love that.
Yeah. We get these like out of season sort of like, it's really, really warm right in the winter, or like it's sort of like, or really, really sort of, you get that really crisp, very fall day and you're still sort of very much in summer. We call it the fall preview or the spring preview, because it's just like this weird like day or two where you're like, oh.
That's right.
Those of us who garden, we suddenly have the itch to be gardening again because it's been too hot or too dry or too wet. And then suddenly, I was out the other day and I bought spinach and chard seed because I'll get that in the ground in September sometime so that I'll have spinach first thing in the spring. And it'll be luscious and wonderful. And I'll be so grateful that I took the time to do it, even though I don't want to.
It's funny because I was just thinking about it. Like we've, sort of really moved away for a lot of us, out of the rhythms of the earth, we're sort of like, we eat, we don't really eat with the seasons anymore. Like things are available at the grocery store. I mean, like I work in a space without any windows, so I can't even see like the light changing or the outside or anything else, in a very like enclosed sort of like, I guess it's like a liminal space at all its own, but it's very removed from the outside natural world, but yet we're still all like taking these cues from the changing of the seasons, like because you're buying seeds and and then you're cleaning, so it's just like, it's like, even though we've come removed from some of this to a certain extent, it sounds like we're still very much influenced by it, which is a good thing.
It definitely feels like a very biological impulse.
Mm-hmm.
And not to, I mean, I think everyone is probably pretty familiar with what happens with mammals, and even other kinds of wildlife, amphibians and things. It's hibernation, it's hyperphagia, which is when bears go crazy and done tear up all the trash cans, like just trying to like eat all they can before that time. But if you think about the forest, which I can't not think about the forest, but I'm looking at it right now and it's really amazing. A lot of the plants, perennials, medicinal plants that are long lived, so they're not an annual. Annuals seem to have this imperative that they set seed, and then having set their seed, they're done. They know that they're going to come up and they're going to like shoot up out of the ground and have a whole nother generation of seed within 1 year. But the perennials, it's beautiful. It's called senescence. Senescence is the process of trees changing color. All of the plant life around us, most of them anyway, except for the evergreens, they let loose their leaves. But on the ground, all of these plants are sending all the nutrients and photosynthetic processes back down into their roots to store those carbohydrates and starches for next year. And that's what's going to give them their boost in growth first thing in spring. Another thing that really appeals to me about autumn in particular is kind of like this decay and nourishment.
I love that kind of duality of decay and nourishment, because like it feels like there's been some like closing of doors and shifts, and then kind of like new beginnings at this time period as well for me, and what I've seen outward as well. And it's kind of like growing up, this is when school started, the school season started, so it was kind of also a time for new beginnings and new chapters, and then as well as like reprioritizing, kind of reflecting after like the busy summer what our priorities are, how we've grown, how we've shifted, what we really truly want to focus on in like the last kind of finale, time to bloom, or time to just kind of what we want to get out of our systems. And it feels exciting, but also a lot easier on the nerves.
I did find some quotes, and this one is interesting, from Sylvia Plath. August rain, the best of summer gone, the new fall not yet born, the odd uneven time. And that's from the Unabridged Journals of Sylvia Plath. And I thought that was really neat. I like the odd uneven time because it definitely feels like that. It's just this. It's one of my favorite times of the year. It's my favorite time. I mean, my birthday's in October, and I'm just always been like a fall girl. So I just thought that was really, really cool. And then this one is just from Outlander, the book. It was a beautiful, bright autumn day with air like cider and sky so blue you could drown in it. And
that's the one I had.
Oh, that's the one you had.
Yes. I love that series.
Oh, I found a quote as well. This one's by Jane Hirschfield. The heat of autumn is different from the heat of summer. One ripens apples and the other turns into cider.
Ooh,
Ooh, I like that.
Oh,
good one.
beautiful.
Yeah, that was great.
I've got part of a poem from Mary Oliver, and the poem's called Song for Autumn.
Mhm.
Don't you imagine the leaves dream now how comfortable it will be to touch the earth instead of the nothingness of the air and the endless freshets of wind?
Yes.
Being somebody who loves to walk in soil, that just made me happy to think of leaves, looking forward to that.
With the walnut trees, they start to drop the walnuts, and you can just be like, here, if you're outside, it's like thud, thud, thud. And I just really love that, except when they accidentally hit your windshield and break it. That's not good. But that did happen. Yeah.
Do you make anything out of them?
I made a black walnut green hull infused oil.
Hmm.
Mm.
And so it was a little bit of an experiment because I think I wanted to make some sort of fungal salve or something, or just play around with. Like a lot of times I'm like, what can I use? You know, if there's something in my environment that there's a lot of, I'm like, I should try to make something with that. I don't know. I just love black walnuts. I like walnuts. Starting to eat a bunch of walnuts now. I don't know. It's a thing.
They're great for your brain.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Super
good.
great for your brain.
That's good because I have ADD, so maybe that is why I'm just like on this walnut thing.
Well, I played a trick on my husband with the walnuts, black walnuts, because I'm foraging June berries and whatever I can forage around the neighborhood in the area, and he was really suspicious. He said, "Well, we have all these black walnuts. Why don't you do anything with those?" And I just looked him dead in the eye and I said, "Because it's man's work." And he went, "Oh," and I said, "No, traditionally in Appalachia, that's a man's job." And he was like, he's from New York, so he was like, "Oh boy, I'll take that on." And then he came in and he said, "You didn't tell me that how hard they were." But now he's worked out a whole plan. And so he will go out and he'll bust a bunch up. And I use them in like fruitcakes that I make in the wintertime. I love the flavor of black walnut.
People are like, "Oh, I just run over them with a car," but I'm like, how do you get the walnuts then? Because the little pieces get smushed and
Right.
into the dirt, and I'm like, anyway, yeah.
It's easier to forage apples, truly.
Well, I should invite all of you over to enjoy our persimmon season, because all you have to do is stand under a tree with a basket, and my goodness, you will land right in it. It's like the sound of rain sometimes, sitting in the persimmon grove. We have about 40 bearing persimmon trees, and they were not planted, so they're wild, and they've really kind of taken over. And so North American native fruit, like pawpaw. I believe pawpaw might be the only other tree fruit native to North America, and they're so good. I wish I were better in the kitchen. I'm terrible in the kitchen. I can forage it, I can grow it, I can do all of the stuff, but forget about cooking it. I have to leave that to more skilled folk than I. So. But they're amazing, and it's so fun to harvest them. But Lordy, you better make sure that it's ripe before you eat it, or else, yes, your face will no longer have a mouth hole. It'll be like.
Is that the pawpaw or the persimmon? Or both?
Persimmon.
Is it persimmon season now, or is that
very soon?
Ooh,
start dropping. I still see some green ones and some bright orange ones on the ground. But with our American persimmons, they have to be just basically pudding before they're ripe, which makes it a little hard when they fall off a 50-foot tree, they kind of tend to splat. But I mean, it's amazing. It's like you can get really great ones, and we get them by the pound. I can go pick like 5 pounds a couple times a day, probably.
Oh my gosh!
It's very bountiful, and we are very grateful. And
So what do you do? Do you like freeze them or?
You can puree them. Okay. I try to give as many away as I possibly can because I have a tiny kitchen and can't deal with them, and they're best shared with friends, I do believe. Perhaps enemies, the unripe ones. But so yeah, I share them out, and then I'll usually kind of puree them and then freeze the puree. Mm-hmm. And then you can use them in baking and like persimmon bread and things like fruitcake.
Mm-hmm. Sara gave me a big bag of them last fall, and I made persimmon cake with black walnut.
Oh,
it was really good.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I need to come down and see you and make and get more and make you some cake and bread, since you're not a kitchen person.
I'm not a kitchen person. May the ancestors have mercy on me. I'm not.
I'm not that good either. No. I had no idea that persimmon was native either. Yeah. It's just like you don't. Yeah.
You see these beautiful Asian persimmons in the grocery stores, and they're quite a bit different. They're more like apples. They'll hold their shape. Yeah. You know, they don't have quite so much moisture in them. They don't turn to pudding when they're ripe. But their flavor is not as strong and not as spicy. American persimmons really do taste just like spiced applesauce. Yeah, they taste like cinnamon, cardamom. Byron, help me out here.
Oh my
god! Kind of applesauce, and yeah, specifically good for baking. They're a little hard to eat raw, but absolutely the baking season.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. That's another question like I didn't think about, but you know, foods and stuff like that for fall and things that maybe you would only eat sort of around this time. And I just, I'm glad you mentioned the persimmons and the walnuts.
I have a quick quote, which is not attributable, unfortunately, but I kind of have adapted it. It's sort of a short one. And so in my version, it says, in autumn, nature shows us how beautiful it is to let go. Mm-hmm. And yes, it's that process of senescence, which is just fascinating and beautiful and sad and bittersweet and hard to let go of sometimes, but it's really beautiful. And then, you know, it kind of goes back to the cycle of decay and nourishment, because that's in the forest, at least out here. You know, that's what builds the soil upon which the whole entire forest sources its life, is the soil, the loam, the the microbes, the mycorrhiza, you know, insects, you name it, roots. That's the source of everything, and that can only really be possible to leaf, you know, the leaves falling off the trees and decaying and composting into beautiful fertile soil. So I kind of like to try to draw my own parallels if I can.
Yeah, and it reminds us always of the cycle of creation, destruction, and creation, and that each of those things is indebted to the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have the cycles of life all around. I mean, in autumn, many plants are dying. Like, they're not going to come back. They've set their seeds for the next generation. Then you have perennials that, you know, and shrubs that go dormant, and they return all their nutrients back to their roots to grow again. You have trees, obviously, which do really fun things in springtime, like the sap running. But, you know, it's all possible thanks to the loss of leaves and mushrooms.
Oh, that's right.
Mushrooms.
Yeah. Are we ready to pop over and chat some about winter? Unless anyone else
Sure.
anything else to add about fall while we're still on that?
It's wonderful, and it's the best season. So there.
Yes,
I agree.
agree.
Until we talk about winter. No.
Agree.
Mhm.
Yeah, winter. What's your favorite thing about winter, and what does winter represent?
I like
You
to
have
see
any-
the naked trees.
Mhm. Yeah. Winter is my tending fire time. I never knew how much I enjoyed tending a fire. We moved here, if y'all can remember, it was the winter of 2017. We moved back here, and
Whoa.
yeah, we got a lot of snow. We were up in Trust, which is close to Max Patch, and I've never had a wood stove. I never, I just didn't grow up with that. I was real little when we had a wood fireplace. And I was like, we had to get our wood. We had to, I mean, our house that we were living in was a converted barn. Like it used to be a barn. So it was freezing. Like I could feel the wind coming through all the outlets that were on the outside walls. And we had never lived in that sort of cold because we came from South Carolina where they shut down school for like sleeting, So, I mean, we just didn't know what that kind of cold was. I knew right then that's it. From now on, we have to have a fireplace or a wood stove, something that keeps our home warm because I enjoy tending that fire so much. And that's what I think about during wintertime is tending my hearth, like literally
Mm.
inside tending the hearth.
My family's from New York, so from Brooklyn, and we came here and we bought this like old farmhouse, and it had a wood stove, and that was my first experience with fire and wood stove. Yeah, I used to get off the bus and go build a fire. I agree. I love the fire. I love having a fireplace. The heat is so warm and cozy, and there's just nothing like it.
Does anybody heat primarily with wood now?
No, we don't heat primarily, but I'm not quite sure what kind of furnace we have or heater we have for this home. But when it hits a certain temperature, it's almost as if it can't heat anymore. Especially during the day, we will like just keep the fire as hot as it can get so that it will keep the house warm. Because we too live in the woods. There's not a lot of sunlight that hits the house. So we don't typically get a lot of warmth except for a couple of hours during the day where the sun comes in these windows right here. So it stays cold. It stays cold right now, even in the summertime, especially right now because all the leaves are up. So we do use a lot of wood and typically keep it going during the wintertime.
It's a big investment.
It is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
It is.
not only like the tools to do it, but the wood. And I don't know, my son was asking me how old the trees are that we were using for firewood. And,
Oh, wow.
if you think about that perspective, it's just like, well, son, I don't know. I guess we can count the rings.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, wow, how hard did these trees labor to get so large?
Mhm.
Then we get to bring them and utilize their energy in our own beneficial way. But I get to thinking a lot about the first people here and how they would have lived and how they do. I'm sorry, not would have, how they do live in the older way, the old ways, and just fire is life. I mean, you couldn't even boil water without it. And so, we have a creek. I guess I could haul buckets, but I mean, it would need to be boiled, And so, yeah, it's definitely an investment of time and energy and very spiritual for sure.
And
But-
awareness. You have to really be aware all the time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So when we first moved here, we started blessing our wood. We would get our wood. Typically, this time we would have already had our wood for the winter. We can't chop any trees where we are because we're renting right now, so we're not allowed to use the wood that's here. So we have to, haul it in. And I would always bless it beforehand because I just felt like that was the only way that I felt I could honor without being the one who actually took the tree, that we could honor and, ask it to keep us warm through the winter. But you're right. It's a big investment. It's an investment in time, but it's also an investment in money. And I think about those people every winter. I'm like, those people that have to heat their home, all with wood. It's scary because if like by February, sometimes it's very hard to find wood. And I'll start seeing a call for wood. Does anybody have any extra firewood? And I know here in Madison County, there's like a special group that works with those people and gets them those kind of things, if they need it. But you're right. It's a big investment all the way around. And you got to stay close to home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Growing up, when the blizzard of 93 happened, and we lost power, we had heat and we had, a way to heat water for like toilet flushing and things like that. And I remember one of my classmates, and he said that they were lost power for like a week and they just didn't have any heat. And they were just like all like huddled together. And I was just like, that's terrible. So I think it's a really good heat source to have, if not like as a primary source, but as a backup or in conjunction with other means of heat. But I love that it's sort of like a technology that's still around because it's so dang useful. It's just like this.
Mhm.
We've had fire and wood stoves for such a long time, and it's sat alongside with electricity and all other kinds of like heating sources, and I think that's really, really neat.
I think it's a great connector to our ancestors, having that time in the winter time where we're able to, I realize not everybody gets to have, has a fireplace, in their home, but, because they absolutely had to have it going 24/7 just to cook and do all the things that they needed to do. And I do think it's a very humbling experience, and it allows you to kind of step into that, wow, what they had to do to carry that and keep that going just to survive. There's a big appreciation to that, especially in the winter time.
Mhm.
It's definitely different when you get used to turning on let me turn up the heat, right? And then thinking about like this, like you said, Lori, thinking about that is just.
Well, and when we think about how that's how all the cooking happened too.
Mhm.
So you had to keep, if you were that farm wife who got up at 3 to make sure everybody had a giant breakfast, then you got up that early to get the fire stoked up in the wood burning cook stove. And then you cooked all day. And you hoped somebody would keep the kindling basket full so that you could keep the stove going, but that heated your water, cooked your food, and heated part of the house.
I don't remember my great grandmother very much. She lived in Buncombe County, but I do remember a couple times when we were real young, we would go visit her. And the one thing that I remember is we would walk up these big steps. Obviously, they probably aren't really big, but I remember them as being big. But we'd go straight in, and very center in her downstairs area was a big potbelly wood stove. I just remember this big black potbelly wood stove in the middle of the house. So,
Wow,
that is very eye-opening to all of that, how it is the central thing for a lot of people that lived here during that time. Byron talks about it all the time. And then she had a big wood cooking stove. Those are the few things that I remember about her, but it's the center of her home.
Yeah.
So that's important.
Heart
Cooking.
and heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Now we get used to turning the oven onto 350 because we're going to bake something in the oven. But back then, you put the kindling in, and you just kept putting your hand in there to see if it was going to be a fast oven or a medium oven or a slow oven. And you needed a fast, super hot oven to do things like biscuits, but you needed a medium oven if you were going to roast meat. And it took a woman, and it was almost always women. It took them a while to master that, to understand how much wood equaled what kind of temperature. It was so much more complicated than the kind of lives we live now.
And yet, in some ways easier, because imagine, mastering all of these skills from an early age. I mean, it's like your daughter, you watch your mother. It's like you get to learn from your grandmother. I mean, for me, we're really isolated out here, and it's just us. And it's like a million times I have just wished for someone. It's like, oh my gosh, please tell me how to do this thing. It's like I have to figure it out on my own every time. And so, I mean, the community, the central heart, I mean, that's where it was at. Being able to smell the smoke, being able to, like feel ambient, radiant heat. I imagine that you do it your whole life, you get really skilled at it. So
Oh, yeah.
I was grateful to spend a year in a place with it was like a first generation Scandinavian homestead in New England.
Oh wow.
And it was a wood-fired cooker. It was beautiful.
Oh wow.
Beast of a stove, and it had like a hot water heater, and it had a bread rack, and it had a big one and a little places. And I mean, it was amazing until summer came along. And then no one wanted to be inside because you can't cook on it and still live indoors.
Well, that's when you need one of those outdoor summer kitchens.
Okay. That was my next
You do all the
question.
canning and stuff outside. Still hot, though. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, last week I did strawberry jam that I'd frozen the strawberries when they came in season. So I did strawberry jam, and I blanched a bunch of corn, and then I did some elderberry tincture. There is something to be said for that being your only job, because most of us, that's tending the home is not our only job, tending the home and land. We have other jobs that have to be done. And frankly, when I am at home and off the road, there is something very satisfying and joyful about having to make jam. That's my only job this morning, is to make jam. I don't have to answer 400 emails or edit a book. I'm just going to make jam today. I mean, I love that. And maybe I would get bored if I had to do that for a whole year, but I don't know. I don't know that I would.
Yeah, I struggle just to clean the bathroom every other week.
Right, right.
I mean, maybe making jam is repetitive over time, but you're making food. So you're supporting people and your family, and you're doing a job that has importance. I feel like that my job that I do, it supports my family with money, but it feels like not the same thing.
Feels more direct somehow, doesn't it? If you grew it and then you processed it and then you feed it to your family, versus going out and working for money and then using that money to buy food to process to feed your family. There's more of a kind of direct line about that. But you know who won't take jam is Duke Energy.
That is true.
I can't just give them some jam. I cannot give when the water department wants money every other month for water and sewer and stormwater and all that, they won't take jam, oddly enough.
Hey,
That's too
Byron,
bad.
you can tell them where to jam it, though.
I was about to say, you want to give
I'm sorry.
That's good.
You are good, girl. You're good.
I would like very much to tell Duke where to jam it right about now.
Oh, God, me too. Me too.
Terrible power. I mean, yeah, anyway. Glad for him, though.
Wood stove revolution. Okay, well, not quite, but I'd be like, what would you do if we all started using our wood stove? And then you didn't need your electricity. And wait, we still need your electricity. Okay, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's a whole nother.
exactly. I mean, that whole off-grid thing, it sounds really good, but not ultimately, but the startup of that is so expensive that I think it's out of range for most people.
Yeah.
And I will say this, my 92-year-old grandfather, one day we were sitting in his living room and we were talking about how we wanted to go tiny when the kids finally move out and reduce our, maybe even do some off-grid. He's like, why would you want to do that? And I said, well, we need to reduce how much we're spending. He's like, I've done the outhouse thing. I don't ever want to go back to that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is something to be said to those that did have to live without some of those things coming into having these things. To them, it's like, why do you want to go back?
Yeah. I grew up without an indoor flush toilet. And I still, every time I clean the toilet, I am immensely grateful to live in a house with a flush toilet. I just am. And I could go back. I certainly go to festivals where everybody complains about the porta potties. And I'm just like, well, let me tell you what, you don't want to be in an old outhouse in August for sure. So I could do it, but I sure wouldn't choose to do that.
Yeah.
I might haul my own water and all that other stuff, but I do love a flush toilet.
Yeah.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, I've been using an outhouse for the past year, and I just moved into the farmhouse on the same land, and so I finally have a flush toilet again.
Yeah.
I don't have to do the walk machine to go poop in the morning.
Not be a luxury, but it sure does feel like it after that.
Yeah, because I'm like, oh, hey, what you doing? Oh, just going to poop,
Yep. I'm gonna toilet. I just feel like, it's like not specifically the problem is that we have flush toilets, but it's just how the energy is gathered. That's, I think, I think is the words.
No, I think we know where you're going.
I'm not being able to put it together, but
I feel like you were going towards a way that power is disconnected.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I mean, even being connected to the grid is still disconnected. It feels like to us because it's like this thing. It comes as like this foreign thing, and we get it and we're able to use it for whatever conveniences. But and you know what? I felt the same way now that we were talking about money. It's a little different when you are part of the source. It's like of the garden, and so it's like with money. There's definitely a major disconnect, and certainly with like the consumerism.
Well, it's like we don't want to throw away. We want to keep the toilets, I think, but whatever is powering the toilets, we'd like, I think, overall to have a cleaner source, a healthier source, not damage our planet so much.
Singing the songs of flush toilets, I saw a Japanese toilet the other day that has the basin for hand washing right above the tank for flushing. So you wash your hands and you're creating gray water, and that's what you're flushing with. You're not flushing with potable drinking water. And that makes perfect sense. And you can also, that's what we do anyway. If it's yellow, we let it mellow. So we don't flush after every time we go to the bathroom. Yes, if it's brown, flush it down. Yes, that works. But you can also be sparing with the resources that you use. And Americans just aren't taught that. And we believe we should be able to do whatever we want and use as much energy and water as we want to. And we feel offended when we're told that we have to ease back on stuff. The people now that have sucked the Colorado River dry, they're like, well, what do you mean I can't have a swimming pool? Well, guess what? You live in the desert. You don't get a swimming pool. Period.
Yeah.
There is a really good book called Full Moon Feast. It's by Jessica Prentice, and she talks a lot about our need for light all the time, and how our ancestors, during this time, the day ended at nighttime. You stopped working, when it was dark. Nowadays, like right now, I have all my lights on. It's dark outside. I have all my lights on, and we've just become so accustomed to, these daylight hours. We're not giving our body the natural rhythms of sleep like we're supposed to, because she goes into this long thing. I'm not going to try to paraphrase it all, but how people slept for long periods of time during the winter, and part of some of their spirituality was gained in that extra bit of sleep that we no longer get. You know, we no longer give ourselves that time anymore because we don't go to bed or we don't rest when the sun goes down. We continue to leave our lights on until way past. In wintertime, this is when we're supposed to be taking care of our bodies and, you know, calming down at night, turning things off at night. We've just gotten out of that habit. Everything is right at our fingertips now. And it's gotten us so far out of sync.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you think about the cycle of the seasons, since we're talking about fall and winter, is that nature gives us as people who grow things, it gives us a time to plant, a time to tend, a time to harvest, and a time to rest.
Yeah.
So in the Northern Hemisphere, in the time when we should be resting, we have set up crazy festivals where we have to be with our damn families and buying a lot of stuff and out on the road. So when we should be resting, we've got Halloween, which has become the second biggest holiday in the damn world. And then we've got Thanksgiving, and then we've got Christmas, and then we've got New Year's. And we should just all be resting that whole time. We should not be traveling to Los Angeles or Dublin or wherever we have to travel to visit our mamas. It should just not be that way.
No. And everything in the world has a cycle. Everything, like you just said, has a cycle. And so why would we be excluded from that? We've just allowed ourselves to get out of that.
I mean, I think it's just because of the work, our economic system. It benefits that system for us to have this sort of an impose an artificial schedule on us so that it's just more efficient for that. But for us as humans, it's harder because it's not what our bodies are used to. Like, I'd love to take a month off, everyone have a month off, or like, you know, maybe like reduced hours at the grocery store because it still has to be open or whatever, something like that, where like all get like a break. Because I just was like, oh my gosh, when is the last time I had an actual downtime? I can't remember. It was like last year, because I only get a certain amount of official days off from work.
Well, there was a meme that passed through my Facebook feed the other day that medieval peasants had more time off than we do. Medieval peasants.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that idea, though. The notion that the grocery store would close at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
in the winter. It's like, get it done on your way home and get home.
Yeah, it was open for like, you know, a small window of time, 4 hours or something, so they can have rest too. Because, you know, I used to work at a grocery store.
I mean, the entire world rests more than we do. They have planned holidays everywhere, you know? I mean, what are we doing? Working ourselves into the ground is what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
Wow. That got heavy. I just think there's so many small changes that we could make, but the culture is just not ready to make them.
Yeah.
We live in a culture that is dominated by both capitalism and Christianity. And those two things tie us in knots all the time.
Yes, they do.
Could I read my winter thing?
Yeah. Yes, we
Winter
can
quote?
do winter quotes.
Because you'll all know this, so you can even say it with me. But it's just the beginning and the end of this poem. And it's Robert Frost stopping by woods on a snowy day, which is one of my favorite poems in the world. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. And then the end of the poem is, the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. And that really encompasses the whole feel of winter to me.
I actually have another Robert Frost.
Good.
The way a crow shook down on me the dust of snow from a hemlock tree has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. I love Robert Frost.
I do too. I love him so much. That's beautiful.
I have an Italian proverb. I don't know who
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
that says, those who sing through the summer must dance in the winter.
I like that one.
Oh,
Simple, but
Yeah.
profound.
This is by Edith Sitwell. She's a poet. Winter is the time for comfort, for good food and warmth, for the touch of a friendly hand, and for a talk beside the fire. It is the time for home.
Ooh,
That's a good one.
that's a real good one.
I don't have a quote, but I do have a fun thing to share, perhaps. Fun. I don't know. I guess that depends on what your idea of fun is, maybe. But I love seeing the bare bones of the land, like rocks. We have rocks here that are just astounding. Granite, ancient granite where we are. We have boulders and mountains and cliffs and rock bars, which is just where all the boulders kind of come down and settle, halfway down the mountain and stuff like that. I've been trying to convince myself through long, very, very long winters that, it's not so much a lack of life on the ground for me as it is a gift of the sky. Because we live in the forest.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard. The trees block out the stars and sometimes the moon. I mean, we're lucky enough to, be able to see the moon as it passes. I know the moon's path very well. And, only at certain hours can we actually view the moon in the summer. But just the gift of sky in the winter means a lot to me. And it's something instead of what a lot of people feel like is nothing. And so I've been trying to craft this ritual in mine and, my family's life, doing all kinds of wonderful celestial observations and studying the sky and studying constellations and all of that kind of stuff. We have a telescope we can only really use in the wintertime because otherwise we'll just be getting fuzzy leaves.
I like that you said that about the bare bones of the land. So it's like kind of reveals what's underneath.
Yeah, I mean, we also have the evergreens here because we live on a mountain with lots of rhododendron. So whereas the trees die back and the ground is more bare than not, we still have a lot of evergreens like rhododendrons and hemlock trees and things like that. So I've been really delving into the folklore of evergreens, which, is obviously very close to our heart out here. We have holly too, which is just so fabulous. My dear friend Holly.
2 questions. How do you guys do anything specific to get ready for the change of seasons? Either like fall or or winter. So we're talking about both. And then how might you suggest if someone wants to connect more to the idea of seasonal change, how could they possibly start to bring that into their lives? Because we have been talking about kind of this disconnect in our routines, even though it's like right in front of our faces, the change.
2 things that I think are really important, any season, but even this season right now, is pay attention outside. One thing that I've recognized about here, when I know the cooler months are coming and autumn is knocking at the door, we get these little red and black spiders. I don't know if anybody else gets them. And they hang out near our door. And it's just this time of year. This is the only time that they come out, because once it turns just a little bit cooler, they're gone. And I've just recognized that every single year. And I think there's a lot more that I recognize, but I think if people start paying attention when seasons change, they'll actually start I guess, being more involved in what they see. They feel more connected in that way, and they're able to recognize things without even really knowing what you know what I'm saying. It's like, oh, it's that time of year, and moving on. So I think that's one of the things to get closer to recognizing the seasons changing. And then another one is to eat seasonally.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
All about food. I'm all about food magic. And, I work a lot of farmers markets, and it's so important this time of year, all through the year, to really get in touch with your food. And that is a great way to get in touch with the season. We're starting to see pumpkins and squashes, and that's that great mother goddess energy coming into season right now. And that is something that we can absolutely indulge in, because it's very seasonal for us here. And not only is it a great way to connect, but it's also good for our bellies. So I mean, this is just, and we need to be giving some love to our bellies before the holiday seasons come. So I do feel like eating seasonally and paying attention outside to your microclimate and connecting with that.
Yeah, it just feels like a big time to support ourselves with herbs as well, and like medicine making and different herbs for shifts, like passion flower, like herbs that are just stress relieving and supportive of the nervous system, like lemon balm and bee balm and chamomile and passion flower, but also like different herbs that are supportive for grief, um, like Star of Bethlehem, like flower essence, or like that are also supportive for the energetic transitions that we might be going through. Loved ones that are passing.
Yeah, I just laid down some vervain oil yesterday, verbena hestata, and I use that as a grief oil. I use it for massage. I use it for candle dressing, all kinds of things. Now's the time to do that. And mugwort is super plentiful right now. And that's an amazing herb for all kinds of things. We were in New York. I went up to speak at a goddess conference, and I overnighted with a friend in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I bought corn. And I bought it at a farm stand. And I literally could see the field where they had picked the corn that morning before I came by to pick it up. So there's something about that immediacy of the food that we eat that I think is terribly important.
I remember I spent one day as a CNA with this lady who had dementia, and they sent me, it was my first time out, and they sent me to this lady, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I am over my head here totally. But she was like, I'm supposed to go to town, and I'm like, no, you're not gonna go to town anyway. So she was just, and then she is this lady in this little house, and then her son, like I guess they had land, and he just did the land, and she's like, let's get some corn. And I was like, okay. So we got some corn. They had corn growing. That was my first time shucking corn. So that reminded me of that. And it was kind of mealy, and I was just like, gross, but also, okay, that makes sense.
Was it silage corn, dent corn?
I don't know what kind of corn it was.
Because I know around here when I was growing up, people love to get that heavy, what we call dent corn now, and they referred to as silage corn then. The big white, the kind of corn that makes grits and cornmeal. And that was the preferred kind of, because the rest of it, people said it was too sweet. I can't, it's like eating sugar. I'd like to have me some corn I can get my teeth into.
It might have been that. I mean, she's just like, it was like time had stopped at their house and gone back like 50 years. And she literally like cooked the corn for her son. He came in and ate it and then went back out in the field.
Wow.
It was very bizarre. But I had this. I was like realized that I had never shucked corn before, and my mom used to grow corn, but for some reason I just didn't get to do that. So
It was an experience, right?
it was an experience. Yes.
And your
Yes.
first day, wow.
Yeah, I didn't go back. I couldn't do it. I was just like, I can't. I just have to help people a different way. So but she at the end she was like, you can come tomorrow. And then I found out she liked walking. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, if I was coming back, we would just walk. Okay, it's tangent land. Right. Sorry, everyone. Yes, my brain does that. It's just like, oh, corn. I have a corn story.
The corn podcast.
Right. Yes. It's renamed.
Let's talk about hominy now. How you make hominy with lye.
Ooh. Well, I would like to know that too.
Well, what I want to know is how to make alcohol with corn. I want to study with somebody old who knows how to really do that, old school.
Wow.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I would love that.
I did enjoy learning how to make mead. That was really fun. Even though I can't drink it because of my tummy, but I really loved the idea of, oh wait, you just make a tea and then you put anything in it and then honey and then this sounds good. As we know, some places on our planet, they don't have 4 seasons. Sometimes they have 2. Sometimes maybe they have 0. How do you think this affects the idea of change in the lives of the people there? And do you think they have other ways of connecting to the idea of change?
As someone who thinks a lot about all of this kind of stuff, at least the nature aspect, that like kind of perspective from a naturalist here, and also as someone who's not really well traveled, I have not ever really had the opportunity to, travel around the world like my imagination takes me all the time. But I love studying different places on the planet and, indigenous cultures, all of that kind of stuff. That's just something I absolutely can just lose track of time for like forever and not come back if I don't make myself. But I recently was watching this fantastic show, despite being by an older white fellow. He is one of my favorite older white fellows. That's David Attenborough.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he's a credit to the human species in my humble opinion. But he did this series, Green Planet. The Green Planet is his newest one, and it is all
Great.
completely botanical perspective. And there's not a lot of plants that we have around here, but I can use my imagination to know, if this happened somewhere else, this is likely what happens in our forest. Like plants track the sun. They use all of this amazing technology and photography to show us in live, real, and even sped up time what the plants do. One of my favorite quotes, I think he said from the series, he was, you have places in the world that can change a whole awful lot. And then you have this temperate zone, which we're in, and it's 4 seasons of relentless change. It's just relentless. I mean, it never not changes. And so you have these places in the world that are quite extreme. You have the poles, you have land of the midnight sun and the aurora borealis and the aurora australis. And these things that can only happen, on that parallel in that region. And then you have the equator, and for them it's mostly a factor of wet and dry. It may not change because they're equatorial, but what does change for them is the monsoon season, the dry season. And it's pretty amazing discover through technology of all things, of course, all these incredibly interwoven patterns and things that happen in the world. For instance, the great storm in Africa sweep up this nutrient, mineral rich soil and take it across the ocean and dump it as rain onto the Amazon rainforest. And, even though they don't have seasons like we do, they're the lungs of the earth. They can't just kind of like stop and take a break. They're the earth's life support, quite literally. Thinking about the context of, 4 seasons of relentless change, we're kind of special in that way, this temperate zone of the planet. Like I said, I'm not well traveled, so I don't really know like so many of the stories and the cultures personally, just from what I've been able to imagine and read and learn and study for a really long time. But adapting, I feel like, is something that we have to do very well. Obviously everybody has to do it very well, but certainly a special kind of adaptation for us in a land of relentless change for completely different seasons. And all the life around us is having to make immediate use of, their energy stores, their food stores, foraging, all of that. So, maybe if I were to propose one way to get in touch with nature during any of the seasons, it would just be to, not necessarily forage. Some people don't have access to amazing places to forage, and some people, may need to find a community or, someone to learn from. But, even if you don't actually consume the thing, you could forage by, like keeping a nature journal. I guess the one thing that's most prevalent to me is the change and watching all of my favorite trees and plants and animals through each season. Because everything that lives in this area kind of has a distinct one, more or less, maybe minus humans, more or less. I feel like human nature in general kind of feels like we're too good to be a part of that. In some ways, it's like we have to remove ourselves from nature and the seasons. We have to extend our lights and, travel all around, like not be bioregional and, things like that. I would love to leave it to all of these other amazing women to fill in the blank when it comes to how that affects the people that live there. But those are like my thoughts when it comes to different places in the world, the extremes.
Now that you brought that up, I can see how it would be really bad if the rainforest had a fall, like they lost their leaves and had and it's something that I have not thought about at all. And so, yes, thank you very much for bringing that up. And
I kind of like to think about, my dad lives in Florida, so they don't get a lot of seasons change. Obviously they'll get some, but it's nothing like what we experience. But he's always the first to tell me, okay, we're in hurricane season. This is hurricane season, and it is a real thing for Floridians, hurricane season. And I like to think that sometimes it's not necessarily fall, winter, spring, summer, but it's different things that happen in different regions, and that's how they interact with that season. Because for this season, he's making sure everything's ready to go. They have water, their generators going, they're all of these different things, which is very similar to what we do. When we prepare for the winter, it's just called something different for them. And I'm pretty sure most places, even just in the United States, have different parts of the year that maybe not necessarily see a season change, but something changes for them. And I think that is, can be said across the board, across the entire world. Different things happen during different seasons. And that's how some people connect to that, especially if they don't see the weather necessarily changing, getting colder or hotter or whatever. I mean, that's kind of how I view, and even tell people when we're talking about, I guess your will of the year, your time, your seasons, or your time of the year, recognize where you live and what is going on where you live. If you live in Hendersonville, it's apple season now, y'all. So around apples.
That's
Right.
the closest town to me, and oh my god, apples.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is like unbelievable there. So I mean, every region has something changing. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a season, and people can connect that way.
But it's still called apple season. It's still called hurricane season.
That's right.
So I guess it just sort of expands that definition of
Mhm.
what a season is.
Yeah.
It's a
yeah.
period of time
Season.
marked by an annual event or annual something, or instead of, we just think about, fall, spring, winter.
Not everybody has that.
Not everyone has that. Yeah.
So, but that's how they connect to
But
their
they still have these things that happen.
Yeah.
It feels so bioregional, like
Yeah.
apple season. It's like I have mushroom season here, which is 3 months late, by the way, which is deeply unsettling because of our drought that we've had. It's the wettest drought. It's crazy. It's like we have rain, but it's never even enough to get past the leaves on the trees.
Yeah.
And so everything's so dry. And, usually we've been like knee deep in chanterelle mushrooms right now. But I mean, that from holler to holler, from family to family, there must have been, like these personal favorite seasons for those out collecting. And, a part of the woods is hunting season. I mean, I think that's certainly quite universal wherever you go in the world, But what's in season and when? Deanna, what's your favorite autumn herbal, or your favorite thing, the best thing to harvest in autumn when it comes to what you're growing?
Well, on the note of mushrooms, my favorite is normally by now I also have harvested a bunch of reishi mushroom, and I haven't found any yet. I'm also getting way more over harvested, but it's my favorite tea to make in the fall is reishi on in a crock pot, and going for just kind of having in the crock pot with and sometimes I'll add a little bit of rose or a little bit of other different things to just kind of build up my immune system for the transitional times, as well as just it's just the whole body kind of system support. And then for herbs, outside of that, I mean, I've been just so in love with passion flower this year. I know that it just really calling me to work with it a little more. And I know it's great for circular thinking, but also just as saving the leaves too. All the focus can be on the flower, and I've been saving a lot more of the leaves and the vine, and just kind of supporting people's nervous systems. I just feel like I need to stock up on passion flower medicine for the fall for people, and just as a way of prevention for addiction, but also for just supportive of meditations. Because a lot of people are wanting to go back into drinking because they can't fall asleep, or I mean, not doing bad, but if they're heavy, having a hard time with it, and just so passion flower can kind of help that circular mind. And also just kind of bring the passion back to life, and passion just your love of life, and sensuality, sexuality, just what nourishes our hearth fires. And so, that's my
herbal fire keeping.
That,
keeping the fire through herbs. That's great. Thank you.
All right. So before we wrap up, does anyone have anything they would like to add about our discussion? I feel like we have definitely definitely discuss a lot. But if anyone has anything else they'd like to say.
I just want to say how grateful I am to have this kind of conversation with these amazing women,
Yeah.
because everybody brings a different thing, but all of our things kind of weave together into this really beautiful basket of information and love for the biosphere that we're on. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you all.
Thank you, Byron.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Thank you guys for coming.
I feel grateful as well. It's nice to chat with you all. I like this kind of like round table method.
Yeah, me too.
And before my ADD gets completely out of hand, we're going to wrap up. So I'd like everyone to briefly say where maybe we can find you on the web, or if you have a project you would like to mention. Now is the time. And Deanna, we're going to start with you.
You can find me at deannarose.org.
Okay. Lori?
So you can find me at sisterofmotherearth.com and on Patreon, Sister of Mother Earth.
And you're also at the farmers markets?
Oh, yeah, I'm at the local farmers markets.
So if you're in
North Asheville, Weaverville, Mars Hill. Yeah. And I think I'm starting up Asheville City in the next few weeks.
So if you're in the Asheville area. Okay. Byron?
You can find me at myvillagewitch.com, but we're getting ready to revamp the website. Okay. You can find me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Insta. And I also am on Patreon. And mostly you can just find me around town at Raven and Crone on Tuesdays and in the backyard the rest of the time.
And you can read your books.
You can read my books. I have 6 books, 3 of them on Appalachian culture. And I've just got my first run of edits back on my new book, which is, it's going to be about simple, practical magic. And that'll be out from Llewellyn next fall.
Awesome.
Very good.
Awesome. And Sara?
Thanks. I'm not sure where to start. So maybe I'll start with my most recent one, which is that I've recently helped create a website on ginseng conservation, which is very deeply close to my heart. It's been a many-year project in the works. It's certainly been a crash course in science for me, although I am absolutely in no way, any way, shape, or form a scientist. But I have great respect for conservation biology. Yeah, I could say more, but I'm just going to say that I have batcavebotanicals.com, and a lot of the work that I do is with education and outreach for agroforestry with Appalachian Forest Farmers.org. Yeah, I'm grateful to be part of this group, and everybody, I'm sorry, I'm quite the hermit. You can come visit me anytime though, and Deanna and Lori, I'm so glad to kind of meet you in this way, and really look forward to getting to know you both.
Well, all of everyone's links, I'm going to put them on the in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, they'll be in the description. All right, so you can find this podcast on YouTube, Instagram. You can listen to us on Anchor or Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can support this podcast by leaving us a review and or a rating on Apple Podcasts. Very helpful. Or if you would like to support us with your dollars, you can go to Anchor and hit the support button. So I want to thank everyone once again, and we will be back next time. So yes. All right. Bye. Bye.
Bye.